My friends, there is a darkness that does not belong to the individual, yet it infects him like a plague of the soul. This darkness is not born from a solitary wound, but from the accumulated, contagious wounds of many. It spreads through nations and religions, politics and families, until one forgets where it began and why it persists. I speak of collective hatred, a psychic poison whose roots extend deeper than any ideology and whose tendrils choke even the noblest intentions. To understand this phenomenon, we must descend willingly into the shadow, not the personal shadow that contains your repressed desires or unacknowledged shame, but the collective shadow, the archetypal domain of evil that emerges when groups unite in their disowned darkness and call it righteousness. It is not enough to say that hatred exists in the world. You must ask, what psychic truth gives hatred its irresistible pull? Why do we so easily fall into it when we are among others? The crowd always has a seductive power. When the individual joins the crowd, his ego dissolves into a sea of impulses. The voice of the self of reflection, conscience, of the sacred interior is silenced. He no longer feels responsible for his acts, for he acts in the name of something larger, a cause, a country, a movement. And in that transfer of selfhood to the collective, a curious phenomenon occurs, the projection of the shadow onto others. We are always tempted to locate evil outside ourselves. It is far more comforting to believe that the other, those who are different, estranged, threatening, carry the burden of corruption. This is why groups in every age have designated scapegoats, those onto whom they can cast their sins, their shame, their unresolved inner tensions. The Jews in Nazi Germany, the heretics of the medieval church, the witches of Salem, the political opposition, the immigrants, the poor, the rich, the deviant, the stranger. But these projections are not merely political or social. They are psychic mechanisms, archetypal processes by which the ego defends itself against the terrifying truth that the very darkness it fears lives within its own walls. Hatred, when it becomes collective, offers the ego an escape from self-awareness. It says, you are not guilty. They are the problem. Eliminate them, and you will be free. But what the ego cannot see, what it refuses to see, is that by aligning with hatred, it becomes the very force. It despises, it merges with the archetype of the devourer, the destroyer, the dragon who consumes in the name of purification. And thus, one who once feared evil becomes its host. The unconscious has no morality, only energy. It does not care whether your hatred is justified. It only knows that you have fed it with affect intensity, obsession, attention. And what is fed grows. This is why the more we demonize the other, the more we become demonic ourselves. We are pulled as if hypnotized into the archetypal dance of opposition, good and evil, light and dark, us and them. And in that opposition, the soul fractures. What is the consequence of such a fracture? At first, the individual feels a strange euphoria. Hatred provides clarity. It organizes reality into neat categories. The ambiguity of human nature is replaced by a binary worldview. We are good, they are evil. This illusion soothes the anxious ego, which fears the chaos of uncertainty. But beneath the clarity lies madness, a splitting of the psyche that blinds one to the complexity of the human condition. I have seen it in patients who could no longer recognize their own cruelty because they were so convinced of their moral superiority. I have seen it in nations who believed they were purifying the world while burning it to ashes. I have seen it in churches, in families, in lovers. Collective hatred is a possession not of a demon with horns, but of an archetype autonomous, overwhelming, divine in its wrath and terrible in its blindness. And yet there is hope, for even in the most violent projection lies a call to wholeness. Every enemy we create carries within them a fragment of our own soul. Disowned and denied, every act of hatred is an invitation to examine what in ourselves we have refused to face. You must understand this deeply. The psyche is a mirror. What you see in the other is, in some mysterious way, already in you. When a group gathers to vilify an outsider, they are unconsciously attempting to rid themselves of their own unconscious content. But the unconscious cannot be cleansed by violence. It only retreats deeper, and from that darkness it will return with greater force, with sharper teeth. We are living in a time of fragmentation. The modern world, with its overstimulation and technological escape, has weakened our capacity for reflection. We no longer withdraw inward, we rush outward, and in that rush we find communities, not of contemplation, but of outrage. We gather in digital mobs, cloaked in anonymity, to crucify those who offend us, and with every act of virtual violence, our own souls dim. We become what we hate. What is required is not more ideology, not more purity, not more judgment. What is required is courage, the courage to stand alone before the mirror of the unconscious and say, yes, the evil I see out there lives also in me. This is the first act of true individuation. Individuation is not the pursuit of perfection. It is the integration of the opposites within. It is the willingness to hold tension without collapsing into dogma. It is the alchemy of the soul, where base instincts are transmuted not by repression, but by awareness. If you find yourself caught in collective hatred, pause, ask what part of me is being projected onto the other, what wound in me has not yet been healed, what longing have I turned into rage. This is the inner work, the descent into your personal underworld. And like all myths, the underworld is filled with monsters who are not enemies, but aspects of the self waiting to be named. The Greeks understood this. They gave us the story of Perseus and Medusa. Medusa, with her petrifying gaze, is the embodiment of the repressed feminine rage. Perseus cannot kill her by looking directly at her. He must use a mirror, a symbol of reflection. Only by reflecting upon the image of our own terror can we conquer it. And even then, the task is not to destroy, but to understand. Modern man has forgotten his myths. He believes himself rational, enlightened, but he is possessed by forces older than civilization. His science cannot protect him from his unconscious. His politics cannot save him from his projections. Only the slow painful, sacred work of inner integration can do that. You will not heal the world by joining the next witch hunt. You will not find peace by hating those who hate. The cycle must be broken within you. And to do that, you must enter the realm where symbols speak, where dreams whisper, where the soul remembers. Do you recall your dreams? Have you listened? The unconscious does not lie. It shows you the face you have hidden, the desires you have disowned, the fears you have buried, and sometimes it shows you the enemy, not as a person, but as a part of you. In your dreams, the enemy may appear as a shadowy figure, a beast, a stranger. Do not kill them. Speak to them. Ask what they carry. Often it is gold. This is the paradox. The enemy is the gatekeeper to your inner treasure. Hatred blinds you to that truth. But love, not sentimental love, but the fierce love of truth, reveals it. To love your enemy, as the mystics say, is to reclaim your own soul. And so I ask you gently but firmly, where has collective hatred stolen your inner light? Where have you become unconscious in your certainty? Where have you forgotten that the other is also you? We must not mistake collective unity for wholeness. Wholeness is not found in the clamor of the crowd, in the slogans and banners, in the shared animosity that binds one group against another. That is not unity. It is fusion, a dangerous blending of egos into a single faceless monster. In such states, the individual is devoured. And with the death of the individual comes the death of conscience. You see, the collective does not have a soul. The soul lives in the individual, in the tension between opposites that only the solitary consciousness can endure. The collective is an unconscious force, and its movements are instinctual, mythological. When you feel the pull of collective hatred, you are not simply agreeing with a political ideology, you are being pulled into an archetype, the warrior, the judge, the purifier, and these are not roles you play. They are spirits that possess. Look at history. Every regime that has spilled innocent blood began not with violence, but with an idea of purification. The desire to purge the world of its impurities is always rooted in a refusal to confront one's own. It is a projection of personal filth onto the social stage, dressed in the garments of justice. Beware of any movement that promises salvation through the destruction of others. Now you may ask, but are there not real injustices? Are we not called to resist evil, to name it, to act against it? Of course, I am not calling for passivity. I am calling for consciousness. Resistance that is not rooted in self-awareness becomes vengeance. Justice without inner integration becomes moral fanaticism. The shadow of the righteous is often the darkest, for he cannot see it. He believes himself to be the light. This blindness is dangerous because it enlists archetypal energy. Archetypes are autonomous. When you tap into the energy of the righteous avenger, you may feel empowered, chosen, intinent, but unless you have done your shadow work, you will carry out the will of the archetype, not your own. And you will wake one day, as many soldiers have, asking, what have I done? To act ethically is not merely to act in accordance with outer rules. It is to listen deeply to the inner voice that speaks not in commandments, but in symbols. The ethical act emerges from the encounter with the self, that center of the psyche which transcends the ego, the archetype of wholeness itself. The self does not speak in hatred. It does not demand annihilation. It invites integration. Consider this. Why does hatred feel good at first? Because it gives the ego a sense of strength. It hardens the boundaries of identity. It offers certainty in a chaotic world. But it is a false strength built on exclusion. Real strength comes from holding complexity, loving what is unlovable, acknowledging what is shameful, allowing contradiction to live in the same psychic space. This is the crucible of individuation. We are all fragments of something greater. Each of us is a sliver of the universal soul, shattered and scattered. When we hate another, we are hating a piece of ourselves. We have not yet understood. When we demonize a group, we are exiling a part of the human story from our hearts. But the psyche seeks wholeness, and that which is rejected will return, not as a friend, but as a symptom, a nightmare, a crisis. I recall the dreams of many patients during times of social upheaval. They dreamed of wild animals in the streets, of strangers breaking into their homes, of floods washing away familiar places. These are not mere coincidences. They are the psyche's attempt to compensate for the one-sidedness of consciousness. When hatred dominates waking life, the unconscious reveals what is missing: empathy, reflection, the capacity to see the other not as threat but as mirror. Do you see the pattern? What we suppress returns. What we refuse to integrate haunts us. The monsters of myth were never just stories, they were psychic facts. The minotaur in the labyrinth is the rage we locked away. The hydra is the hate that multiplies when struck blindly. The dragon is the unredeemed shadow, guarding the treasure of wholeness beneath our fear. And yet, modern man has no myths. He lives in the illusion that he is free from superstition. While being possessed by ideologies, he does not understand. He mocks the ancient gods, yet worships modern idols, nation, race, party, tribe. These two are archetypes, but without sacred awareness. They become profane, they become weapons. You must understand that the unconscious is religious by nature, not in the dogmatic sense, but in its yearning for totality, for the union of opposites. When that yearning is not fulfilled through inner work, it will be projected outward, and that projection becomes dangerous. The sacred drive becomes a crusade. The longing for union becomes mass violence. The search for meaning becomes addiction to certainty. And so the task is clear, not simple, but clear. Withdraw your projections. Reclaim what you have disowned. Sit with the discomfort of ambiguity. Ask always, what is this conflict revealing in me? If I feel hatred, what part of my own story has not been heard? What grief have I not mourned? What fear have I named as evil? When it was only my own vulnerability, let us return to the symbol of darkness. Collective hatred is a darkness that grows, not because it is strong, but because it is unacknowledged. It is the absence of light, not just outer light, but the inner light of awareness. And that light can only be found in the depths, not the heights, not by rising above, but by descending below. Do not be afraid of the descent. It is the path every hero must take. The descent into the underworld is the first movement of transformation. You must meet your own inner tyrant, your own inner scapegoat, your own inner crowd, screaming for blood. Only then can you choose something different. Only then can you respond, rather than react. This is why I say every social movement must be accompanied by psychological work. Every protest must be mirrored by introspection. Every cry for justice must be matched with a cry for wholeness. Otherwise, we will repeat the cycle again and again, oppressor and oppressed switching places. But the shadow never integrated. The wound never healed. The wound is sacred. Do not forget this. In the ancient world, the healer was often the one who had been wounded. Jung, the great centaur, was immortal, yet wounded eternally. He could not die, nor could he escape pain. And from that paradox came wisdom. Likewise, your wounds are the source of your deepest insight, but only if you stop using them as weapons. Collective hatred is a misuse of the wound. It says, because I suffer, I have the right to make others suffer. This is not healing, it is revenge. And revenge is a fire that consumes the one who lights it. I have seen this even in the most well-intentioned people. They begin with a desire to correct injustice, to speak truth, to stand for the voiceless. But if they do not attend to their own inner voices, if they do not heal the wound in themselves, they will eventually become mirror images of what they resist. Their faces will harden, their compassion will wither, their light will dim. Even as they cry for change, you must not let this happen to you. Remember, the work of the soul is slow, deep, and silent. It does not clamor for attention. It does not perform. It whispers. It weeps. It waits. And if you learn to listen, truly listen, you will hear the guidance that comes not from the crowd, but from the self, that quiet voice that says, come inward. There is more to see. There is more to become. The path forward is not to escape the world, but to re-enter it with new eyes, eyes that have wept, eyes that have dreamed, eyes that have looked into the abyss and not turned away. Such eyes do not hate. They see, and in seeing, they illuminate. We cannot escape the darkness by denying it. We must walk directly into it. Through the fog of instinct, the fever of ideology, the noise of collective judgment, and arrive at the inner sanctuary where silence reigns and symbols rise like ancient constellations. The unconscious does not scream, it dreams. And the dream, if properly read, reveals what hatred conceals, the unfinished story of the soul. One of the most dangerous illusions is that the enemy is external. But the psyche will not allow such an easy division. It knows better. What you do not face within, you will encounter without, not metaphorically, but literally. The repressed content becomes fate. The unconscious, when ignored, will express itself in your life like a god wearing a mask. Your relationships will crack. Your health will falter. Your peace will wither. And the world will appear filled with mirrors. You cannot recognize what you call hatred may, in truth, be a disguised grief. It may be the grief of unlived life, of potential denial, of longing twisted into resentment. The collective offers you a scapegoat, and in your hunger for relief, you may accept the offering, but what you sacrifice in that exchange is your own psychic sovereignty. You become an agent of the archetype, not an individual. Individuation begins the moment you say, "No, I will not hand my wound to the mob. I will hold it myself." This is an act of tremendous courage. To remain conscious when the collective turns unconscious is an initiation into the deeper life. It is the way of the mystic. The seer, the true revolutionary, for revolution without revelation is merely repetition. Yes, you may be labeled weak or naive or even a traitor to your tribe. But remember, the one who refuses to hate becomes a mirror in which others see their own violence. And they may not like what they see. Do not let that dissuade you. Stay inwardly grounded. Anchor your soul, not in public applause, but in private alignment. Do not perform virtue. Embody it. Let your ethics be born from dream, from silence, from solitude. The conscience that arises from deep contact with the self is the only reliable compass in times of collective madness. When society demands rage, try tenderness. When it demands certainty, dare to ask questions. When it demands punishment, search for the meaning beneath the mistake. This is not to excuse harm, but to heal it at its root. The human being is not born whole. He is born fragmented, and life is the process of psychic reassembly. Each person you hate is a missing piece. Each conflict is a test of your willingness to integrate what feels foreign. This does not mean that you must agree with everyone or tolerate abuse or abandon discernment. On the contrary, it means you must develop the kind of inner clarity that no longer depends on enemies to define you. You see, when we build our identities on opposition, we are always reactive. We are never truly free. The moment our enemy disappears, we feel unmoored. Who are we without something to push against? What happens when the cause is won? The war is over. The conflict dissolves. Often what arises is despair, not because peace is wrong, but because the psyche has not matured. It has become addicted to conflict, to adrenaline, to the seductive feeling of being righteous. And righteousness, unaccompanied by inner work, becomes shadow inflation, a bloated, brittle structure that cannot bear the weight of the soul. This is why true healing begins not with outer change, but with inner collapse. The collapse of certainty, the collapse of egoic control, the collapse of the persona that says, I am good because I oppose evil. What remains is the naked self standing before the mystery, no longer sure, no longer superior, only open. And in that openness, the unconscious begins to speak. A patient once dreamt of a war between two nations. In the dream, the flags were beautiful, but identical. The soldiers, though wearing different colors, had the same faces. When he awoke, he was disturbed. Which side was I on, he asked. I told him, both, that is the nature of the unconscious. It reveals the opposites as one. It invites the ego to surrender its need to be right and instead become real. Realness requires complexity. It requires paradox. It requires a descent into what the mind rejects. And the heart fears. Only then can one truly encounter the archetype of the wounded healer, that inner figure who transforms pain into wisdom, hatred into understanding, and fear into guidance. This archetype lives in you. You may feel him stir in moments of deep reflection, in the quiet, after a breakdown, in the soft ache, after an argument. He does not shout. He does not seek followers. He waits. And when you are ready, when the noise of the collective has become intolerable, he will lead you to the river that flows within all of us, the river of myth, symbol, and soul. Drink from that river, and you will begin to remember not facts, but truths. You will remember that evil is not something to be destroyed, but understood, that the enemy may carry your unlived life. That love is not sentimentality, but the force that holds all opposites in tension. Let us not confuse love with agreement. You can love someone and disagree. You can love and create boundaries. You can love and walk away. Love, in the Jungian sense, is not a feeling but a psychic force, a magnetism that draws you toward your unlived wholeness, even if it wears the face of the other. Collective hatred reverses this magnetism. It repels, it separates, it fragments. And in that fragmentation, the soul withers. The landscape of the psyche becomes barren, dreams cease, symbols, the imagination is replaced by slogans. You must not let this happen. If you feel the temptation of hatred, pause, step out of the collective current and into the stillness of your own breath. Ask yourself, not what do they deserve, but what am I carrying? What fear, what memory, what ancestral wound still bleeds in me? The unconscious is not bound by time. You may be hating with the fury of generations. Your anger may belong not only to you, but to those who came before. Your psyche is a field upon which many battles have been fought. Do not add another without understanding the war. It is through symbolic consciousness that we begin to metabolize these ancient emotions, not by repressing them, not by acting them out, but by giving them form. Write the dream, paint the feeling, dance the grief, speak the fear aloud to an empty room if you must, but do not numb it with ideology. Symbol is the soul's language. When collective hatred robs you of symbol, it robs you of soul. It demands literalism, absolutism, finality. But the soul dwells in metaphor. It speaks in riddles. And the riddle of this age is, how do we face our enemies without becoming them? The answer lies not in policy or argument, but in psychic integration. Only the inner marriage of shadow and light can generate the compassion fierce enough to interrupt the cycle. This is why individuation is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is the spiritual immune system of the psyche. Without it, we are vulnerable to possession by the collective. With it, we become centers of light in the dark, not because we deny the dark, but because we contain it. You are not here to escape the world. You are here to alchemize it. Start with yourself. There is a sacred tension in the human soul, the tension between the longing to belong and the calling to awaken. Collective hatred exploits the former to sever the latter. It offers belonging without awakening, identity without reflection, and unity without wholeness. And in that bargain, the inner light dims, not all at once, but slowly, subtly, as if the soul were closing its eyes to fall asleep among the masses. But the unconscious never sleeps. It watches, it dreams, it waits, even in the heat of hatred. The unconscious continues its work quietly, persistently, whispering through the cracks in our persona, through the symptoms, the strange coincidences, the broken relationships, the sudden illnesses that no physician can explain. It speaks through synchronicities, those moments that seem to defy logic, those glimpses into the mythic structure behind everyday life. And if we listen, if we dare to pause in the midst of our righteous certainty, we may hear something terrifying and beautiful. The truth that we are not who we pretend to be. The persona is not the whole personality. It is a mask, a necessary one, but a mask nonetheless. It allows us to function in society, to play roles, to maintain order. But when we mistake the mask for the face, we cut ourselves off from the deeper layers of being, and in doing so, we create a gap between who we are and who we appear to be. That gap fills with resentment. What does this have to do with collective hatred? Everything. When you are not allowed or not willing to express the darker truths of your psyche, they do not disappear. They descend, they become unconscious. And once unconscious, they seek expression in disguised, displaced, and destructive forms. This is why the most vicious hatred often comes from those who believe themselves the most virtuous. Their shadow has not been integrated, it has been moralized. I have seen this many times, a man who hates liars because he cannot admit his own manipulations. A woman who campaigns against immorality because she is terrified of her own desire. A nation that claims to fight for freedom while it imprisons the soul of its people. In every case, the same psychic law applies, that which you do not face in yourself. You will project onto the world, and your hatred will appear justified, even holy. But the unconscious does not care about your justification. It is not moral, it is mythic. It demands wholeness, not virtue. And so it will sabotage your purity with scandal, your cause with contradiction, your identity with paradox, until you remember what you forgot, that you too are human. This remembering is the beginning of healing. It is the end of the fantasy that you are different, better, separate, and it is the beginning of the descent, the sacred descent into the realm of archetypes, dreams, and the forgotten gods. Let us speak of dreams for a moment. The dream world is not an escape. It is a mirror. It shows us, often in symbolic form, the parts of ourselves that are lost, neglected, or feared. A dream of being chased may reflect the part of you you're unwilling to confront. A dream of war may reveal the inner split you refuse to heal. A dream of the enemy may be your own soul, masked in otherness. You must become a student of your dreams, not for entertainment, but for survival. For in a world overtaken by collective hatred, the dream becomes a lifeline to the self. It restores balance. It compensates. It whispers what the world shouts over. And in that whisper, the soul begins to remember itself. When we stop listening to dreams, when we deny the irrational, the mysterious, the symbolic, we fall into literalism. And literalism is the death of the soul. It leads us to believe that the world is flat. That meaning is obvious, that the symbols are childish, but symbols are the language of the divine, and to lose them is to go blind in the realm of spirit. Hatred thrives in literalism. It says, they are evil, we are good. But the soul says, they carry my shadow, and I carry theirs. Hatred says, there is no mystery, only facts. But the soul says, the facts are never the full story. Hatred says, eliminate the other, and you will be safe. The soul says, integrate the other, and you will be whole. This is the deeper work of psychology, not the adjustment of behavior, but the retrieval of soul. And soul work cannot be done in the mob. It is solitary, slow, sacred. It requires sitting with your own contradictions, your own wounds, your own capacity for cruelty and compassion. And it requires humility, the humility to admit that you do not know, that you are not whole, that your judgments may be projections, that your certainty may be fear in disguise. This humility is not weakness, it is strength, for only the humble can go. Only the humble can integrate, the proud remain rigid. And rigidity in time breaks the thing of the great myths. The hero does not triumph by killing the dragon. He triumphs by facing it, by descending into its cave, by recovering the treasure hidden in its belly. The dragon is not the enemy, it is the guardian of transformation. So too with hatred. It is not to be denied or suppressed, but understood. What does your hatred conceal? What wound does it protect? What grief does it veil? Let yourself ask these questions, not once, but continually. Let them guide your reflection. Let them soften your judgments. Let them turn your gaze inward, not to escape the world, but to meet it with the eyes of the soul. And slowly, the darkness lifts, not because it disappears, but because you are no longer afraid of it. And in that courage, in that inner light born of descent, you become a vessel of transformation. Not a savior, not a prophet, not a warrior, but something rarer, a human being who has seen the shadow and not become it. A human being who has felt the pull of collective hatred and chosen instead to create, yes, to create, for that is the true alternative to hatred. Not passivity, but creativity. Hatred destroys, creation integrates. Hatred fragments, creation binds. Hatred closes, creation opens. And to create in a time of hatred is a revolutionary act. So paint, write, speak, garden, parent, heal, teach, dream, imagine. Every act of creation pushes back the tide of collective shadow. not with violence, but with wholeness. But let your creation be rooted in awareness, not ideology. Let it spring from the depths, not from performance. Let it be wild, strange, symbolic. Let it be haunted by the very darkness you have dared to face. Only then does it carry power. Only then does it serve the self. And the self, my friends, is not you. It is not your ego. It is not your opinions. It is the archetype of totality. It is the mystery that unites opposites. It is God within, not as a concept, but as a living, unfolding presence. To serve the self is to step out of the collective current and into the sacred river of individuation. It is to say, I will not be consumed, I will not project, I will carry my own shadow, I will create from the chaos, I will live from the center, and from that center, light radiates. Not a blinding, aggressive light, but a soft, persistent glow. A light that does not need to convert, to convince, to conquer. A light that simply is, and that, more than anything, is what this world needs now. There comes a time when the inner work must return to the outer world, not in the form of doctrine, not in the form of conquest, but as presence, a presence that does not seek to overpower, but to reflect, not to be followed, but to awaken. The one who has passed through the fires of the unconscious, who has gazed upon his own shadow without flinching, becomes not a prophet, but a mirror, and this, I say, is the highest service one can offer to a world possessed by hatred. You become the still surface upon which others may glimpse their truth, if only for a moment. You do not speak loudly, for your very being carries the resonance of integration. You do not preach, for your life is the sermon. You do not condemn, for you have seen the seeds of every evil in your own soul. And you have chosen not once, but again and again not to water them. And so the work continues, not in dramatic gestures, but in small moments of radical consciousness. The pause before reacting, the breath before judging, the question before condemning. These are sacred acts. There is a great lie in our time, and it is this that change must be massive, visible, collective, and immediate. But the soul knows otherwise. The unconscious transforms not by revolution, but by symbols, by stories, by slow integration. It moves like water through stone quietly, patiently reshaping the very foundations beneath the surface. And so too must you move in your conversations. Choose presence over persuasion. In your relationships, choose to see the archetypes at play, not to manipulate, but to understand. In your solitude, choose to listen not to your ego, but to the deeper voice that speaks in silence. You may wonder what that voice sounds like. It will not flatter you. It will not reassure you that you are right. It will show you your brokenness with tender clarity. It will call you to descend when all the world is climbing. It will break your certainty with paradox. And if you stay with it, if you do not flee, it will begin to reveal the hidden unity beneath all division. This unity is not sameness. It is not agreement. It is the soul's knowledge that light and dark, joy and pain, love and hatred, all belong in the tapestry of wholeness. Nothing is to be excluded, only understood. To live from this place is not easy. You will feel alone at times, even alien. You will see what others do not and feel what others refuse. You will carry grief that is not yours alone, and joy that defies your circumstances. You will become mythic again, not in fantasy, but in meaning. Your life will no longer be measured in achievements, but in symbols, and the most important symbol you will carry is your own heart. A heart that has not shut itself off to the world, even in the face of cruelty. A heart that bleeds but does not harden. A heart that sees the enemy and whispers, I know you. I have been you. I contain you. This is the heart of the integrated being. And this is what the world fears and needs most of all. You ask, perhaps, how to begin, not with books, though they help, not with systems, though they guide. You begin by returning to yourself, not the self you present to others, but the one who watches in the quiet, the one who dreams strange dreams, the one who cries when no one is looking, the one who feels everything but does not yet understand. Go there. Sit with that self. Do not demand answers. Just be. Let the silence stretch. Let the discomfort rise. Let the symbols come, and when they come, perhaps in a dream, a memory, a feeling, do not interpret them too quickly. Let them breathe. Let them speak. The unconscious is not a puzzle to solve, but a realm to enter. It is a temple, not a textbook. You must learn to kneel within it. If you dream of a house, ask yourself, what part of my psyche is asking to be entered? If you dream of water, ask, what emotion is trying to flow through me? If you dream of an enemy, ask, what part of myself have I cast out? This is not analysis. This is communion. And from this sacred dialogue, you will begin to re-inhabit your life, not as a puppet of the collective, but as a soul awakening in a world asleep. You will walk through cities and forests and homes and temples carrying the secret fire, the awareness of the shadow within, and the refusal to project it outward. You will resist the seduction of the crowd, not with arrogance, but with reverence, for you will know that every time you refuse to hate, you turn the wheel of history subtly, quietly, but unmistakably. And when you fail, and you will not fall into shame, you will say, the shadow again, and you will return to the work. This is the spiral path, not linear, not heroic, not glamorous, but real. And it leads not to perfection, but to wholeness. And wholeness, my friends, is holiness, not in the religious sense, but in the mystical sense, the sense that you are not divided, that your inner and outer lives are aligned, that you no longer need enemies to feel alive, that you have become a sanctuary in a world of fire. Let the fire burn. Let the world rage. You are not here to extinguish the fire, but to carry a different flame, the inner light, the symbolic flame, the self. And so I leave you not with commands, but with invitations. No task, But thresholds, let this be your practice. When you are tempted to judge, pause. When you are pulled into outrage, breathe. When you feel righteous, reflect. When you see the enemy, turn inward. When you feel lost, dream. When you feel alone, remember the archetypes walk with you. When the world becomes unbearable, create. And when hatred knocks at your door, invite it in, speak to it, learn its name, and then let it go, not as an enemy vanquished, but as a part of you returned. This, then, is the quiet revolution, not of swords or slogans, but of soul. You do not need permission. You do not need agreement. You only need willingness, willingness to face yourself, to hold the opposites, to carry the tension, and to walk the path inward, even when the world shouts outward. If enough of us do this, not en masse, but each alone, something will shift. The collective will feel it. The hatred will begin to lose its grip. Not because it was fought, but because it was seen. And in that seeing, wholeness begins again. Thank you for walking this far. Now, go, not to escape the world, but to re-enter it from within.